Onwurah from Labour's Shadow Cabinet Office. Chief.
Thanks very much, Brian, and thank you for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here. Well, not actually to be here as a Newcastle United fan, though I can say there's some consolation to know that whilst we may not be able to beat them on the pitch regularly, we can certainly beat them off the pitch when it comes to keeping our conference guests dry. But it is a pleasure to be back in Manchester. A month ago, the Labour Party was here for our conference talking about policy and plans for government. For me, as the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister with responsibility for digital government, as well as cybersecurity and social enterprise, I spent a lot of the conference talking about the power of technology and how it can improve public services and empower citizens. Which is why I'm really pleased to be back in Manchester today with the people who don't just talk about it, but do actually do it. I mean, actually, I was here a week ago as well in Manchester to meet digital startups at Google North and to meet with social enterprises. So I'm beginning to get to know Virgin Whale as well as East Coast. I know which one I prefer, but I know equally that I am partial to public services, especially good public services, such as that offered by East Coast. Anyway, I'm beginning to digress a little, but what matters is that most of you are ICT practitioners at the level which actually matters most to local people, local government. I first engaged with Socitm when Steve Halliday chaired a round-table debate on another advert for Newcastle, excellent book published by Newcastle University, Digital Government at Work. And I was struck there by how the concepts and challenges, which were sort of theoretical, sort of abstracts to many in policy making, were real practical problems to Socitm members. And I'm pleased that government is now beginning to recognise the importance of working with, and not on, local government when it comes to digital services. Now, I believe it's important that all of us, citizens and computer scientists, local government officials and legislators, it's important that we all understand how technology will change our lives, the opportunities and the challenges that these changes will bring. So that was why at the end of last year I launched the independent review into digital government, focusing on how we can put citizens in control of increasingly digital public services, including data and information usage, particularly in the areas of value creation, consent, trust and privacy. The review builds upon Ed Miliband's promise that information on individuals should be owned by and accessible to individuals, not hoarded by the state, and that we would be a government of, and I quote, people-powered services. And the review has 9 propositions, which I'll just go through briefly. The first is around access and skills. Second is information rights. The third is supporting communities. The fourth is citizen needs first. The fifth is people-powered. The sixth is continuous innovation. The seventh is digital framework, the architecture one. The eighth is digital procurement. And the ninth is skills and culture. Now, I think particularly as a Labour politician, I've always been interested in why it is that, given the historically, I believe, positive relationship between technology and democracy, and the huge positive potential, so many of the proposal, the ICT plans of governments, local and national, are hailed as attacks on privacy or the citizen. And right now, I think it's fair to say that most people are experiencing what I call digital discomfort. You know, the sense that the security services know everyone that you're calling, that Amazon is telling you what you should be buying, you know, that online porn is attacking our children, the feeling that Google is recording our every move, or simply the onslaught of spam and cyber worries. You know, technology and the internet in particular are forces for freedom, democracy and accountability. And as an engineer, I worked as an engineer for 20 years before coming into Parliament, I regard myself as a champion of technology. But it's also clear that it provokes fear and suspicion, particularly amongst certain groups. And if you add that to the fact that all too often government is something done to people, then there's a very clear conclusion that digital government must not be like that. And so that's why the Digital Government Review takes as its basis that there is a need for better integrated services which reflect the needs and capabilities of citizens and their communities and put them in charge. And this is at a time when local government is under, as we've heard, as I experience continuously, under unprecedented fiscal pressure, thanks to this government's decision to balance the books on the backs of the poorest. Now, we have said we will devolve power as close as possible to the citizen rather than hoarding it in Whitehall. So how then can we square the circle of better services which are more individual and local and which cost less? Now, we have had some interesting examples of how digital government can work in practice, and I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more during these 2 days. In Newcastle, we've piloted Chain Reaction. It's an adult social care programme where personal budgets are used not for individuals to sit in daycare, but for shared activities like a trip to the cinema, co-producing care based on shared preferences and capabilities, and also saving money. So the review is looking at where digital government is working as well as where it is not. Local government, as it often does, provides some of the best and some of the worst examples. Amongst local governments where so many public services are delivered, we have pockets of greatness, but we also have a vastly disparate set of solutions and services. And our own research during the course of this review has raised some concerns. So we asked every council, perhaps some of you got the request, we asked every council about their IT services. Several councils responded to the wrong email address, but fortunately to the right domain, and as we owned the domain, we could pick up the response, but that suggested at the very least that they didn't have any automated way of responding or handling inbound questions to the council. 40% of local authorities did not respond at all. 14 said that the cost of responding would be too high, suggesting that they did not have an ICT asset register. Several authorities reported that they could not respond as elements of their ICT had been outsourced. And we're still analysing the results, but the emerging picture is concerning and tallies with evidence from other organisations, including Socitm. So, fewer than 10% of councils received 4 stars in Socitm's Better Connected 2014 survey, with only 31% passing standards for mobile access. Now, it's clear that many authorities are too small to tackle the problems on their own. It's unreasonable to expect every authority working on its own to be able to achieve on what larger central government departments have failed to achieve on much greater budgets. So instead, we need to increase collaboration and reuse to enable all authorities and the public community, and the people, communities and businesses in them to benefit from the scale of the whole sector. And I know that's not a simple matter to address. There are issues of culture, leadership, accountability, collaboration, and the building architectures based on common systems. But I do know that local authorities are rising to the challenge. So the only other day I was meeting with the Association of North East Authorities, which is reporting on its policies to promote and extend collaborative procurement across the region using a hub and spoke model. And I look forward to hearing from other regions about what they're doing on collaborative procurement. So the consultation process for the review closed in June. A number of local authorities did respond to us, as well as you can imagine, large telcos and SIs, but also academics, think tanks, trade unions, professional bodies such as Socitm, and small tech providers. So we had a wide, and we also had 2,500 responses on a survey, monkey survey we sent out. So we had a wide range of responses, and we'll be publishing the report in a few weeks' time. So what I will do today finally then is just share with you some of the themes that have emerged. The first is digital inclusion. There are still 5 million households that have no access to the internet, either because they don't want it or because they can't get it. And there are millions more who do not feel confident using it for one reason or another, be it security fears or lack of digital literacy. So this government's finally, after 4 years in power, published their digital inclusion strategy in April, which took as its premise the idea that only 90% of people would ever be online. So that's a digital inclusion policy which assumes that 1 in 10 people will never get online, and that is not going to be our approach. The second theme is around data, particularly the safe, secure and accountable and legitimate sharing of data in both the public and you also won't get the skill set in every local authority. That's not possible. So we do need to see how, what sort of groupings make sense. I talked about a regional, example of a grouping. Is it possible that a kind of regional model might be the best way for local authorities to work together and to share best practice and to share applications and to share the design and development of a platform which can be open whilst being absolutely dedicated to meeting the needs of each given local authority's citizens and residents.
Okay, thank you for that. Just one last shout if anybody has a quick question before we have to break. There's a hand went up very quickly here. If you just bring down to the gentleman, the microphone to the gentleman there. If you could introduce yourself as well when you ask the question.
Yeah, I'm Chris Haynes from Hufffold Associates. Just a simple question for Chi. If Labour win the next election, will you keep GDS?
Well, firstly, I'm not in a position to tell you what every department is going to be in every sub-department in every department of the next government. I can't tell you what this departmental structure will be of the Department of Transport. I can't tell you what the departmental structure is going to be of the Department of Defence, and so I'm not going to tell you what the departmental structure is going to be of the Cabinet Office, though it's a nice try. What I would say is that... Sorry?
There will be a cabinet.
Well, I can't even tell you that. I can't tell you what the departmental structure will be of the government of a whole. But what I can tell you is that the work that GDS has done has been excellent, and we've seen that it's been admired. Obviously, it's not perfect, but it's done a lot of excellent work, and it's been admired and in fact duplicated around the world. And as I said in my speech, having those skills in-house, I think we've got to move away from the idea that you can outsource all your skills outside. So having those skills in-house is really important for government. I think it's really important for national government, it's really important for local government. So we need the skills that GDS has, and as the most digital government ever, we will want to continue with those.
Good question, thank you. I'm the microphone. All right, thank you for that question. I'm sure if any of you have got any other questions you'd like to... Nick's obviously going to be around for a day and a half. I'm sure if anybody wants to try and grab Chi quickly at the end of this, I'm sure she'll be happy to have a chat with you. Time to break up into an hour of breakout sessions now. I have to tell you about one slight change in venue. If you're intending to go to session A, Federation, the answer to everything, in your book it tells you that's in the international suite, that's actually going to take place in here. So if you want to stay for session A, breakout session, please stay here, and that will take place in this room. If you're going to the other breakout sessions, just back out here, turn right, and there's a block on your left about halfway back to the exhibition was where the exhibition was, if you came from the exhibition, and everything is in there. So walk down the wind tunnel, get blasted by wind, hope you've still got everything you're carrying with you, and it's about halfway up there. Given this is, I think, the Alex Ferguson stand, perhaps we should filter that as the hairdryer rather than the wind tunnel. We will be convening back here at 4:15. There will be a refreshment break after the breakout session. That refreshment break takes place where the exhibition was. Please do take the opportunity to go and have a look at the exhibits and the sponsors there. Otherwise, if you could show your appreciation for Nick Roberts and Onwurah,